Fresh and
All right, welcome back to another episode of Fresh and Buds. I am your host, Tommy Fresh, and you are all of my buds. And today I am joined by a bud that we've been joined by before, Mr. Rylie Groff. How are you doing, my friend?
What's up, buds? I'm doing great, man. It's great. Thanks for having me back. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Hey, listen, you are someone that I always, really loved seeing out in central Pennsylvania at Owl Central, typically the only store I ever go out there because they have great events. And, you're always a cool dude to see and a great bud. So, and a really talented player and someone who is great at Limited, in my opinion. And I thought I wanted to talk a little bit about Limited. I did a whole constructed review. We're not going to do a set review here, but we're going to just kind of go over some, quick initial thoughts on the format because we are going to be drafting this set for some time because I believe the next set will be supplemental unless they throw a curveball at us. So it will be fun to talk about, today because the set's looking to be a great Limited set, which is awesome. So, but before we do all that, I want to shout out to the Patreon, which you can find in the show notes. It helps keep the mics hot and the lights on, and you get a lot of extra content there. You get a Romping Club membership card. There is a patron exclusive channel in the Buds Discord, which is open to everyone, but if you're a patron, you get to hang out in there. It's called the Romping Club. And we also have some bonus apps every once in a while. We post some pack openings from the live podcast on the Bud Rush Bello. And we're also doing a new series called Cracking Six and Making Picks, which if you're a patron, you can hop on to a call with me and just chill with me while I open 6 packs, and then kind of we'll just talk about how we would build that pool. And then also, like, as we open the packs, how we felt maybe in a draft. So something really chill, just hang out with buds, and all those videos will go up on YouTube. So speaking of the YouTube, check out the YouTube, like, comment, subscribe. It is a video podcast now, but we also have a live podcast on Wednesday evenings, 9:30 Eastern, with Mr. Viz, aka Gary. That is a fun live podcast called the Bud Rush Bello that we do every Wednesday, and it's a lot of fun. I would encourage you to check it out because once we hit 500 subscribers on YouTube, I will be doing a full adult Levia cosplay, which will be just wonderful and so much fun, right? I've mentioned it before. It's the greatest giveaway of all. It is your entertainment and my humiliation. So it will be a lot of fun, and Gary will also be dressed up as the rabbit that Levi kills to become adult Levi. So it'll be awesome. So all that being said, welcome to the show. We're here with Rylie. Rylie's awesome. We all know that. How are you, my friend? What is new in your life?
Oh, man. Well, first off, I just got to say, you've been teasing that Levia. I know you guys say Levia. I've always said Levia. You've been teasing this Levia cosplay for so long. The anticipation could not be any greater for this cosplay at this point. So I know that everybody's just like chomping at the bit to see this. Are you prepared? Like, have you already got everything together to do this, or where are we at in the process?
No, I like to take things like as they're thrown at me, right? And I know this is coming, but I think once we get a little bit closer, we're getting there a little bit. It's like every day, it's like a few more subscribers, right? And like if you're listening now, like on not YouTube, go check out YouTube, subscribe. But I think around like 450, right? I'll start figuring out what the hell I'm going to do, like how I'm going to do it. And maybe I'll just go to like Costco, buy a octopus and throw it on my head, but we will see how it goes. But how are you, my friend?
Yeah. Well, this has been a really great last couple of weeks for me. Obviously Outsiders came out, so I got to have a lot of fun with that. There's been no real, to me, any real meaningful Limited gameplay for a while. So this has just been a return to form, a return to my passion when it comes to trading card games. And also came out on the same day as the Resident Evil 4 remake, which was one of my favorite video games of all time. So I've just been playing a lot of that. Just had a great weekend. It's been a lot of fun stuff to do.
That's awesome. I never got to play that, and it's something that folks always kind of recommend, but maybe I'll have to dive into it since it's had the remakes out. I know Diablo 4 beta also came out too, so there's like a lot of things to do right now. Outsiders, Diablo, Resident Evil. So you did some pre-releases. How many did you get to do?
I went to 3 pre-releases.
How'd they go?
Well, the first one went great. I played that one, opened my packs. I had what I didn't know at the time, which was probably an above average sealed pool. Even though I was like, this doesn't seem that good. But in practice, it turned out to be a pretty good Uzuri deck. So that was a 16-person draft. And I was able to win that one. Following day, I went and did 2 more. And then I played Arachne at Owl Central. I lost 1 game there. Got to play against Birdo. So we got to have
Awesome.
a nice game between the 2 of us. And then I played another Uzuri at the last pre-release that I went to. That deck was like markedly worse than the first Uzuri deck I played, but it still went pretty strong. And I lost 1 game at that pre-release as well. Interesting thing to note is Uzuri won all the pre-releases that I was at. So I don't know if that's telling of the power level or of the balance of the sealed format, but it may give some indication on what the best average card pool looks like.
Yeah, it's interesting. I only got to do 1 pre-release, so and I played Riptide. I was the only Riptide in the. It was 11 person pre-release, so it wasn't the full 16, but I was the only Riptide. I went 3-0. Someone else went 3-0, and I think their breakers were better, and they got the prizing or whatever. But it was a lot of fun. I felt, I mean, I will be honest with you, Rylie. I showed up to my pre-release very, very hungover because I was coming from a bachelor party weekend in the Poconos. So I was like, and for whatever reason, the last night I was there, I went the hardest. It's, hey, what can you do? And I show up and I'm not doing well. I open my packs. I'm like, I don't know. This looks good. And I just shuffled together Riptide. And it ended up being like a lot of fun. And it was really cool because I played against every other, except for Katsu. I played against every other hero. I guess not Azalea, right? I can only play 3 rounds. So I played against 3 different heroes, which is cool. Because normally, I've found that that has not happened in like a sealed format since I've been playing. I will say that. So it was very cool. Now, what were your takeaways from the pre-release weekend before you even got to draft it? Just like sealed.
Yeah, so my takeaways were decks on average were a lot weaker than I thought that they would be. To the point where a lot of game states, at least towards the end of the game, where the win condition was actually becoming running out of cards and not necessarily running out of life, depending on the quality of your deck. So the weaker that your average card is, the harder it is to actually end the game through damage.
Mm-hmm.
So that was definitely not something that I was anticipating because that's never been the primary win condition of any of the other limited sets. You can make an argument that Odin was able to do that in Tales of Aria, but that wasn't like the general win condition for a lot of the different heroes and strategies. So I found that really interesting. That was very surprising. Within like probably 3 rounds of the first sealed draft that we did, or sorry, the first sealed event that we did, everyone had been adapting to that. Everyone was having a similar experience and saying, I'm running out of cards, and was scrambling to find any amount of playables pretty much to just throw into their deck at that point. So that was definitely a big takeaway, and I was very curious to see if that would translate then into draft as well, or if that was like a exclusive thing to sealed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting, because we've seen sealed formats where it was the opposite, right? Where everything was so powerful that usually the fastest deck would just win, right? And that was Briar Phi. I personally I found the same thing, right? I started with a 30 card deck and went down to my opponent and I didn't have cards, and I just managed to eke out the win with an arrow. But immediately after, oh, I can just throw 5 more generics that I wasn't playing into this deck because it seemed to be a problem. Now, you said you told me before we started recording that you have drafted, since the pre-release. Was it true, or was it the same for draft as sealed for, kind of that gameplay cycle?
So keep in mind that I've only drafted one legitimate draft since then. So, I mean, it's anecdotal experience. But I was really surprised that there were game states that were also coming down to that condition a lot more than I expected, because the power level in draft is expected to be a little bit higher per deck. So I anticipated, because of that higher power level, that we wouldn't be in these game states. But it turns out that it was actually happening a lot, because just some of the card quality and the lack of breakpoints on a lot of cards makes for very, very efficient blocking, which makes not a lot of damage going through a lot of the time. So I was really surprised that in the three draft games that I played, all of those also came down to that game state of running out of cards.
That's pretty crazy.
Anecdotal.
Yeah, so. So for sure. I mean, and we're all still kind of learning the format, right? We kind of have to figure out which cards might prevent that, right? Might kind of push through that kind of strategy, like the efficient blocking. And we have a good idea currently, but I have to imagine between now and the Pro Tour or and beyond, we're gonna have a ton of drafts. And eventually, I don't know if something will be solved or not, but hopefully we get a better idea of maybe to avoid that in a way. Not that I think that's necessarily a bad thing, because we're so used to the opposite. We'll see how much fun it is, but it does make the decision points very important, right, throughout the game. How you're pitching, it's really challenging the ability of the player, which is cool. Which I think is the best part about limited, anyway. So we're gonna take a step back from that and then kind of revisit it for a second, because I just wanted to touch on the fact that the last time we chatted, if you remember, Rylie, we were having we were doing the podcast, and we wanted to talk about Flesh and Blood 2.0, and in typical Flesh and Blood fashion, we didn't know what time zone the announcement was going to be made or whatever, and it happened to be made just right before we started recording. So we started reading it and kind of like almost like live reacting to the information. So I wanted to kind of just touch on it, because we're quite a few months removed from that. Like, I think it was pre-Uprising. How do you feel about the path that 2.0 is on? Because there were a lot of positive changes proposed, and some not so much controversial. But how do you think it has translated to practice?
Overall, I'm really happy with Flesh and Blood 2.0, as I think that it kind of echoes the sentiment of most of the community. Most people probably do feel that way. The thing that makes me the happiest with how they've handled that is just the transparency and the actual capacity to listen to your community and make changes based off of what your community wants from you as a company or out of the game. As the game continues to grow and as the community continues to get better and bigger, that's something that I hope will also carry through with that transition, because to me, that's the thing that I appreciate the most about LSS as a company. They're very responsive. They tend to be very transparent, and they act with goodwill towards the community, which is to cite some reasons why I've stopped playing other card games is because of that. So it's nice to feel a little more safe and secure with a company that I feel actually cares about its audience.
Yeah, no, I have to say that I'm right with you there. It's always been something kind of like almost weird that they're actually so transparent, because you wouldn't expect it. Now, I that being said, they certainly hold some of their cards pretty close to the vest, which, I think we could all agree we would like to know a little bit more, but, maybe it's for good reason. And I'm not here to decide whether it is or not. But, it was pretty incredible that it came out, and it really seems to have followed through for the most part. I can't really think of anything particular to me that they kind of promised that they haven't fulfilled. Now, do you have any criticisms or concerns on the execution, or has it just all been gravy?
So, personally, yes, but I think I'm going to be in the minority with some of the things that I don't prefer. I'll call it a preference because that's really what it is. I don't prefer with kind of the release schedule and the product release. I do not like supplemental sets. If I had it my way, they get rid of them and they'd all be replaced with draft sets. Again, I don't necessarily know that I'm in the minority or the majority with that, but I think I'm probably in the minority. I think a lot of people do like or prefer to play constructed, and they're getting a lot of their support through those sets. But for someone like me who prefers to play limited, primarily is a limited player, that's a huge I'm not like I'll call it dead space because I do play constructed too. It's just not my ideal way of playing the game. So it creates a lot of, for me, less interesting space to play the game, and for pretty long periods of time because we have pretty big gaps. Like there was a long gap between Uprising and now with Outsiders.
Yeah.
So we're talking about over 6 months.
Yeah.
Of not introducing any new real meaningful limited play back into the game. So for me, that has created a little bit of, I don't know if I want to call it boredom, because there's only so much you can do with Uprising. You're not going to draft Uprising 1,000 times.
Yeah.
So you'd introduce new cards into limited that just have a new and more engaging experience.
Well, I will say you're not in the minority of the two people speaking on this podcast right now, because I agree. Now, I would love to see, if they wanted to support, a lot of heroes, right? I understand that, but I would love to see them try to figure out a way to introduce some kind of limited play to it. In its current iteration, can't exist, right? It is what it is. But I feel like maybe they could figure it out, or I think we're getting to the point where we've added a whole new class, in the last one, Assassin, right? And they were able to just pump a bunch of new cards for Assassin into Dynasty, right? Which was very cool. We were all pretty excited about that. But I play a lot of Brute, as people know. The Brute support was like, we got Berserk, which is like, you can kind of do some cool build arounds, and then like Skullcrack was like a nice little addition. But as we get to the point with more talented heroes and different iterations of heroes out there, it's not gonna feel like it feels like impossible to actually supplement everything, right? Levi did not. I mean, like, I know Berserk has the word banish on it, but Levi does not really want to play that card, right? And going forward, now we have Lexi, Azalea, Riptide. Riptide's not going to really want a lot of what the other two Rangers are going to want traditionally, right? So how do you continue to do supplemental sets in the way they were doing is a question for me. Now, I know that the next one, Dusk Till Dawn, Quentin Tarantino movie, but it feels, if they said it's going to be a little bit different, so I'll be interested to see how that works. They'll add some talents and stuff, but yeah, I agree with you. Let's draft more, let's have limited more, and or figure out a way that there is a way to play with that set other than just opening packs and adding them to your current deck. So yeah, not in the minority here, Rylie. So
we've seen this with other games too that have I guess you could call it an eternal format, a non-rotating format too, where it's impossible. Like you were saying, it is impossible to support every hero or deck archetype in the game. So I appreciate that they are trying to hold on to that by doing supplemental sets while they can. But like you said, as we're injecting more heroes and more archetypes into the game, at some point it's going to be impossible.
Yeah, it really is.
So they're gonna have to cut the cord at some point. And so to me, it's like, nah, just rip the Band-Aid off now and give me another draft set.
Yeah, hey, listen, I'm right there with you. I mean, like, look, Crucible War, as far as what it added to the game, great success, I believe, and Everfest, it was very swingy. I mean, swing biggie, and there was stuff that like made decks insane, and then it didn't really support a lot. But there's some stuff that's kind of held on for the ride. And Dynasty, it's kind of hard to say what Dynasty's really going to do for constructed formats going forward. So we'll see what Dust Till Dawn does. Maybe it would change our minds. I doubt it will. I think we all just want to crack packs and play with them rather than the alternative. Now, I do want to touch on something else that we had chatted about when you came on. You were very much a steward of the game in your area that you live in, Central Pennsylvania. A lot of great stores. I know that. I'm only really familiar with Owl Central, but talking to a lot of the buds that live in the area, they can play like almost every day of the week at an armory, which is awesome, right? I think that is not the norm, right? So I just wanted to kind of ask you how it's going out there. Is this something that other communities and areas could start to emulate, or is Central PA kind of a unique situation?
I think that we're very fortunate here to have as many LGSs as we do.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if you're going to be able to emulate this everywhere, because I don't know that you're going to have enough stores really to just support the same schedule. As of right now, it's Monday. I think Monday and Tuesday are the only days that we don't have armories. So you can do an armory every other day of the week if you want to. So you could really be playing organized play 5 out of 7 days here if you wanted to, which like is really awesome. It's really exceptional. We've had a lot of store owners that have been receptive to the game and have continued to support it since we started seeing organized play here like about a year and a half ago. And there's a point at maybe like 6 months ago where I thought we had really tapped the potential audience of new players out of the community, like the local potential player base, but we keep getting more.
Yeah.
I don't know where they're coming from, because at first I was like, I don't know. I think we've reached everyone who we're going to reach. So let's just focus on trying to keep the people who are invested and are playing, keep everyone happy, so that we can continue to foster a positive community. But we keep finding more players. So I don't know if that says anything about the community or the game, or maybe both. But people are attracted to either one or the other.
Yeah.
This is a combination of both of them.
Well, yeah, I'm sure, if I was hanging out at an LGS out in Central PA and I saw that community having such a great time, I would immediately ask, hey, what are they playing? What is this game? And if you're in an LGS already, you're already interested in something like that. So it could easily kind of brings people in. And yeah, it's kind of interesting. Yeah, I mean, it's awesome that we keep getting new players. And I remember when part of me was like a non-believer, not a non-believer, but like oh God, I'm trying to remember. It was Dragon Shield was like, we will show what dishonor is if we get 1,000 retweets or whatever. And part of me was like, yeah, you can get that, but like, are there that many people that are so concerned about, seeing this new card on Twitter alone that will get to see it? And then it like blew up in a matter like a less than 24 hours, and I was, oh, all right, I was glad to be wrong there. And then there's another thing, I've noticed in my local game stores that anytime the professor puts out a video about Flesh and Blood, somebody new shows up to an armory, which is cool. Hey, listen, we'll take it any way we can get it. So now Outsiders, Rylie. Segues are my strong suit. We always do the fresh faves every week. I believe we did the fresh faves with you initially, but we have a new set. So I want to ask you some of your favorite things, cards from Outsiders. So first, Rylie, who is your favorite hero from Outsiders?
Uzuri.
Oh. Any reason why?
I really like mind gamey kind of interactions. Like the first hero I ever played was Dorinthia, and I was very attracted to the reactions and the bluffing reactions, and really making your opponent uh, think, because the direction that this game had gone for arguably the last two sets is there didn't require that much critical thinking
Yeah.
all the time, right? Like a lot of the popular decks, a lot of the most competitive decks, and including the limited formats, like we were saying before, didn't have a lot of back and forth gameplay. You know, there wasn't a lot of blocking here, attacking there. There was a lot of I'm blocking with everything, or I'm attacking with everything, and there's very little that you're going to do to get me to just sway my position. Um, so Uzuri to me kind of embodies that. I'm going to block a little bit here. I'm going to attack a little bit here. I'm going to do what I can to break the turn cycle so that I'm winning incremental advantage over time. Because to me, that's when Flesh and Blood is at its best.
Mm-hmm.
So Uzuri to me embodies that. Will she be hyper competitive? Probably not, because we haven't completely transitioned away from that gameplay style that I was just talking about. See Brawl, the Chicago Brawl gameplay. If you want an example of what that might look like for the upcoming meta. But to me, like, she's a hero that really embodies the best of Flesh and Blood.
That's a great answer. Yeah, did you see the red line Azuri deck from the Brawl this past weekend?
Yes, I did, and I didn't expect to see an Uzuri deck at all, let alone one that looked like that.
Yeah.
So it was cool to see that having success.
It's pretty cool, and this is something that I've found to be true about, this is a nice constructed aside, but it does feel like, maybe Azalea aside, but like it feels like all the heroes in Outsiders kind of have different ways to build them. I mean, I'm thinking more classic constructed. I think Arachne Solitary Confinement is like play stealth cards and do aggro things. But, Azuri and Riptide feel like there's a lot going on in terms of deck building, which is neat. Which weapon is your favorite from this set? There's not a lot of options here.
Yeah, I took a little bit of liberty with this question.
Okay.
And rather than pick a weapon, I just said quivers in general.
That's fair.
Because I really like the addition of quivers.
It's a great addition.
I think they give some much, well, before we saw some of the other stuff, what I believed was the much needed support for the Ranger class, even if the quivers themselves were a little bit underpowered. But I love the idea of quivers in general. And prior to them adding the quivers to the game, the arsenal was basically thematically your quiver.
Yeah.
Which was fine for what it was, but it's cool to actually just have a quiver, see it on the battlefield, have some really nice art attached to that.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I really like the addition of the quivers, and they make for really interesting limited editions too, because both of the Rangers get access to their own special quivers that do their own things. So I thought that was cool as well.
That's a great answer. Love the quivers. Now, what about the other equipment? Which was your favorite other piece of equipment?
Well, I've been playing. Are you talking about weapons?
No. I'll let you do the quiver for the weapons. We're going to equipment now. What you're I mean, we had a lot of options in the equipment genre.
Yeah. For constructed gameplay, I really like flick knives. I think that's a really cool concept, a really cool idea for a card. You take your permanent recurable weapon and you just hurl it out your opponent in desperation. So to me, that's really cool. They did a great job with that card thematically as well. If we're talking about limited though, Threadbare Tunic.
Okay, cool.
My favorite limited card that I've played with so far.
It's a great one. And yeah, flick knives is awesome, especially in practice, right? It looked cool, and then you play against it, and you're like, wow, this is generating a lot of value for something you didn't expect. And which is your favorite run-of-the-mill card? Your attack actions, your non-attack actions, your instants?
Yeah, it's actually the Fable.
Okay, nice. Yes.
Because it is, I think, the most pushed one that they've printed yet. Very powerful card. If it was generic like the other gems, that would see play in every single deck. I mean,
Yeah,
there's
there's
just
no
no
reason not to, right?
way that it wouldn't. Yeah, it's so powerful. I just I just really like that card a lot.
Card's
I
awesome.
couldn't necessarily tell you why, but I like that it has like a modal effect that you can kind of make a choice depending on what the situation calls for. You could give them a blood rot or an inertia or a frailty. I
Well,
really like those cards that are like you have
yeah.
lots of options depending on what the situation calls for.
Well, it is random though.
That's random?
It's
I thought you
random.
picked.
No, you don't pick. Does that change your answer? Now, I like it. I mean, I like
Now
it
I like it
regardless.
more. I think I like it more than random.
Well, it's a little bit more fair because
How do you determine you just roll dice?
yeah, I guess you roll a d6 and because there's three
Man.
options. But yeah,
Crazy.
a little bit of brute into assassin and ranger. Why the hell not, right?
I gotta look this up now. I thought you get to pick the whole time.
Yeah, no, it is certainly a random thing.
Huh.
So it could backfire on you. Like let's say you already gave them
Sure.
an inertia, you can give them a second inertia. But I guess 2 frailties is pretty good.
2 frailties is good. They're nicely stackable.
Yeah. The inertia, unfortunately, not. But the blood rot. Hey, listen, I'll stack blood rots all day.
Yeah. Oh, you're right. It does. It says this. Choose at random.
Yeah. But still, incredible card. Plague Hive.
I like the art a lot for that as well.
Yeah. I saw some people calling it ugly. I was like, I think it's beautiful the way it is.
I guarantee that's one of those cards when you see the original art isolated from the card, it's just absolutely gorgeous.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of the Mark Pool cards have been like that. Like Aether Wildfire, when I first looked at the card, I was like, this seems kind of underwhelming. And then I saw it in person at Charlotte.
Oh,
I was like, this card is gorgeous. Like it doesn't come through at all in the individual card art.
Yeah, well, God, I mean, Waning Moon, and he did Quiver of Rustling Leaves, and gosh, I mean, I guess maybe we're probably a couple Pro Tours away from getting the Plague Hive as a playmat, but I know that one is going to be really awesome. So
for sure. Yeah.
Great answer. I love that answer. I think the Fable is very cool. I've never opened a Fable, so I'm hoping that it is going to be this one, my first ever. So, because I want to play it too. So all right, let's get back into Outsiders Limited, right? First limited set since Uprising, much needed, right? For the morale of us limited junkies. And it's very interesting, right? So, for those who don't know, I'm sure most of you do at this point, but this was a set that they decided to give 2 different heroes for each class, right? So we have Katsu and Benji for the ninjas. We have Arachne and Azuri for the assassins. Riptide, Azalea for the rangers. One thing to note here is we have no arcane damage in this set. Which is a nice break. I think it's been quite some time since we haven't had that. And, you might say that some things like Blood Rot is kind of the replacement there, the sneaky damage and the traps for Riptide. So, but we also get a nice healthy amount of generics. So I want to talk a little bit about the generics. First of all, what's your take on the generics? And in terms of the priority on generics when you're opening a pack?
Mm-hmm. Well, the earlier it is into the draft, the higher they're going to be in the priority list, right? This set feels a lot more lenient as far as when you have to make a decision on what class you're playing, and even further beyond that, what hero then you're going to be playing, like you alluded to before. There's 2 hero options for every class. So in terms of order of your decision making, you're probably staying open for a while, putting a lot of value on the best generics that you can find, then deciding on a class. After that, finally deciding on a hero. So there's an extra step in decision making throughout that process that it wasn't present. It wasn't present with the other sets because depending on your class, you were forced to play that specific hero that was associated with the class for the set. So first, probably 3, maybe 4 picks. The generics are very important, very high priority being put on generic cards.
Yeah, certainly. And, we got a nice little slew of generic equipment, right? We got the Seekers, we got the Silken Gi, we got the Threadbare Tunic, which, I have to imagine is your pack one, pick one, maybe for the whole set. I mean, outside of, some bombs.
Mm-hmm. There are very few cards that I think I would be taking over Threadbare Tunic. At least, at common and rare. If there was anything that was going to get me to change my mind, it would probably be like a red Death Touch.
Okay.
Something that's just insanely good that's going in your deck. But I don't know that there's a lot that I'm going to pick over the Threadbare Tunic, especially because the chest slot is not heavily contested.
Mm-hmm.
In this set, there's three options. You got the Silken Gi, the Threadbare Tunic, and the Seeker's chest piece.
Yeah.
Which is
like Gillette or something like that.
Yeah.
Gillette,
the best a man can get. Like that's very low on your priority list as far as if you're trying to fill out your equipment set. Personally, I just think Threadbare is the best one. So if you have the option to take it, I think you're probably going to take it. It's like getting a Sasha Sandakai from Uprising.
Yeah.
Like you see it, you're just going to take it. It's very, very powerful. Generating a resource for basically no condition. Obviously, it's conditional, but you're going to find a way to take advantage of that every single game, especially with how long these games are lasting. So you're always going to get advantage out of it, and cheating resources is so incredibly powerful.
It really is. There's one. I'm trying to think of it. It's the hand piece that has an attack reaction that buffs your attack. Fisticuffs. Now, I look at that card and initially I was like, whatever. It's like not super efficient. I remember the days of Crackle Jacks when you could just pop your for free and give the next thing +1. But in this format that's going so long, I feel like just being able to add the breakpoint on a stick is pretty important. Where do you rank a card like Fisticuffs?
These games are going so long that the opportunity to take advantage of something that starts on the board will come up throughout the course of a game.
Mm-hmm.
You will be able to use that if you want to, right? You're not always going to want to, because sometimes your cards are just better off being used for blocking versus representing 1 damage in a reaction or whatever. But you can find an opportunity to use everything that you're given in this format. So I think that you can be as resourceful as you want to be, or as resourceful as you feel like you need to be. So like you were saying, even something like that, or the card Blade Cuff, that just gives your daggers +1, or you can block with it. That's a really great card to have too, because it gives you a lot of options. Sometimes I'm going to block with it, and there are going to be games where I might actually just use it to represent some more damage on an important turn. So another cool card.
Yeah, and I kind of love these options here, right? Just in theory, right? I've been just doing like Talishar drafts. I have a draft this week. I want everybody to know when you're listening to this, I'll be at a draft. And I just love the fact that, because you mentioned you have so much time to kind of settle in before you make a real decision, which is a stark difference from Uprising, right? It felt like you needed to figure it out in the first 2 picks, or else, you're really screwed. And something else that kind of helps this is the hybrid cards. So, we have these hybrid cards. They come in Assassin, Ranger, Assassin, Ninja, and was there a Ninja Ranger card?
No, it's just those two combinations. Yeah.
So kind of like, we have this nice common theme of Assassin, right? Which also means Assassin gets like more cards to play with. But, what are your takes on these hybrid cards? Are they high priority? You mentioned Death Touch, which is a hybrid card. Virulent Touch or Virulent Touch is another one that I think about. They're both, pretty good at closing games and very powerful. Where are you on the hybrids so far?
I've been referring to them kind of affectionately as pseudo generic cards, because you can take them fairly early, and there's a 66% chance you're still going to be able to take or like play it in your deck. And with that in mind, if you've taken a couple of them, then it's probably going to force you in one direction or at least encourage you to exclude the left out class, right? Another thing that's interesting is a lot of those hybrid cards are some of the better cards, like you were mentioning. Death Touch, it's really good. A lot of the Assassin Ranger traps are really good, such as like the Frailty Trap and the Blood Rot Trap and things like that. Um, in my opinion, some of the Assassin Ninja cards didn't seem quite as strong as the Assassin Ranger cards,
Hmm.
but there's still some pretty good and playable ones in there too, like the Short and Sharp. The Majestic ones are pretty good as well. Hurl is a fun card,
Yeah.
really good way to try to close out a game. So there's very good options in both sides.
Yeah, yeah, and here's a question: Is there? You mentioned Death Touch, right? Is there a way to kind of determine in your mind how high to rank these? Like when you're looking at your pack, right? Because you have these generics, and the generics are good, but they're not giving these crazy effects that kind of make sense within the set that these hybrid cards. So when you say you have a couple picks to figure it out, are you including the hybrid cards here in those couple, like those like figuring it out stage, the first like 1 to 5 picks?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Like I said, I'm treating them as pseudo generics.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm picking them pretty aggressively as well, because like I said, there's only a 33% chance you're not going to play that card. So I will forego picking maybe another average card if it means I can get a really good card that I'm going to play 66% of the time. I guess maybe I'm a little riskier, a little more aggressive of a drafter in that way. But I'm pretty happy with sending that signal and saying, no, this is my seat.
Yeah.
This
And
is my seat. This is the seat that I'm drafting. You can choose whether you want to listen to my signals or not.
yeah. Well, and on that token, right, you mentioned that we have the ability to wait it out on these
Mm.
picks. But how do you feel about jumping into a lane almost immediately? Is there anything that you'd see that would make you kind of really jump into a lane?
So it's still pretty early.
Mm-hmm.
I think if you're forcing anything, I'll call it forcing because it's
Yeah.
kind of what it is, right? If you're forcing anything, you're probably forcing assassin
Yeah.
because it's the least likely that you're going to get punished
Mm-hmm.
because you get access to all the generics, all the assassin cards, and all of the hybrid cards. So even if you do get a little bit punished, and there's 4 people, 5 people drafting assassin, you're still going to have a pretty playable card or pretty playable deck. So you can do that. I still don't think I would recommend it. I always encourage either drafting your seat or trying to communicate the seat that you want to draft.
Yeah.
But you never necessarily know if the person drafting ahead of you what their experience level is. You're right. So that you
Exactly.
can get punished pretty bad by that as well.
Oh yeah, and then you flip over. Oh well, both Azuri. All right, great, awesome. um, so let's talk about the assassins, right? So we have two. We have Azuri, which we've talked quite a bit about. And we have Arachne Solitary Confinement, right? So there's a lot of things that kind of blend together here. Not blend together, but like are useful for both, right? Stealth is the biggest thing, right? They both need stealth to really hum. Arachne cares about just stealth cards in general and giving go again and then attack reactions that buff them, right? And stuff like that. Now, Azuri also can care about that. Obviously, it does not get the inherent go again, but it has this nice little trickery thing that we had talked about where you can just throw out big attacks. Now, when sitting down at, and you're in Assassin, right? Let's say you're in Assassin before you decided Arachne or Azuri. Azuri obviously probably would need a couple good targets to flash in or whatever we're calling it, Azuri into the arena there. How many of those like cards would you want to kind of tell yourself, all right, this Azuri deck is where I want to be?
Sure. As far as those like the ninjutsu attacks, the
Yeah.
ones that you're trying to swap in. Yeah. 5 or 6.
Okay.
I don't think you need a ton. I think that's actually that's probably a trap or a mistake that a lot of people are going to fall into because as I was mentioning earlier, a lot of these games are really going the distance. And a lot of the times the damage that you're presenting through attacking by expending cards is not as valuable as you're perceiving it to be.
Mm-hmm.
If you're intending on ending the game through running out of cards or forcing your opponent to run out of the cards, sometimes it's better to just attack with your recurable weapons.
Yeah.
Granted, sometimes the situation is gonna call like, yeah, I'm gonna ninjutsu in the sneak attack for 7 damage, and I'm gonna push you more quickly towards reaching that game state. But I don't think you need as many as you probably feel like you do.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna say 5 or 6.
I could see that, right? The threat of activation is the biggest thing here, right? It's like, yeah, makes your opponent think. Your opponent has to be smart. Make your opponent be smarter than you. And maybe they're not, maybe they are, and you still win. Doesn't matter, but like that's what you're doing. 5 to 6 probably sounds about right. Probably, it could anywhere in between there, or around there, 5, 6, 7. But it feels like Uzuri probably has the most, I guess, solid plan here, right? I think, Arachne Solitary Confinement is very straightforward, right? Just stealth cards that go again. So at what point would you consider Arachne over Uzuri in a draft, right? Before you decided. Is it something in terms of the stealth cards that you're being given? Or is it the amount of, I guess, viable ninjutsu targets?
Mm-hmm. Well, the really interesting thing about Assassin in this set in general is they both really want the same cards,
Mm-hmm.
with the exception of very few cards that can be used with both heroes, but are way more effective within the hero that wants them. So, like I mentioned before, Sneak Attack. Sneak Attack is a card that Uzuri wants, but Arachne could potentially make it use of it. Same with a card like Razor's Edge, or any of the spike with affliction cards. Arachne would prefer them over Uzuri, but Uzuri can also take advantage of those cards. So I think what actually makes your decision for you between Arachne and Uzuri is actually the color content of your stealth attacks.
Mm-hmm.
If you have 7, 8 plus red stealth attacks, now we're starting to consider playing Arachne.
Yeah.
Because we can take advantage of those and they're going to be very powerful. But if we have maybe only 2 or 3 and we have a lot of yellow and blue, I think we're probably leaning more towards Uzuri because she's going to take advantage of those through spiders biting or representing a 1 attack isolate and then swapping it in for a bigger attack in the reaction phase.
Yeah, and here's a interesting thing. Now, would it be worth kind of staying in the Uzuri mindset until it starts to look like Arachne is the better option, right? Because it's modal here, right, in the draft. Because they like you said, they have a lot of cards that they both want. Should you look at it like I am gonna try to draft Uzuri, and if it starts to go Arachne, we'll start to figure that out, or is it just something you'll eventually know, like second pack or something like that?
I agree with your insight. I think if you're looking into drafting Assassin, you're defaulting to Uzuri and you're playing Arachne if it becomes available, or if it becomes beneficial for you to do so.
Mm-hmm.
So I just think it's because Uzuri much more easily can take advantage of the blue and yellow assassin cards versus the red ones. And you want the yellow and blue ones as much as you want the red ones when you're playing Uzuri because they pay for spiders bites.
Yep.
And they can be swapped out for an attack. So she takes advantage of all the cards really well. Whereas I feel like Arachne, although he can take advantage of the other ones really well, really wants the red ones.
Cool. Hey, I mean, I think it's very nice that they're so close, but it's also going to be a little tough. I feel like that third pack when you're like, oh, which one am I going with? Because you're looking at the really nice blue, and you're also looking at the red, and you got to think about, all right, do I want to commit to Uzuri? So very cool. I think the Assassins, I think they really knocked out of the park here with, the archetypes they kind of created here. It feels different, but the same, which is cool. Now let's go to the ninjas. So the ninjas are something that I probably am the least comfortable with, like in theory. Like when I sit down in a draft, I feel like, combo lines are, there's some simple ones in the set, so it's not that hard. But even when I drafted WTR, Katsu was not really what I defaulted to. It was usually Reinhard Dorinthia. So what's your kind of overall takes on, Katsu and Benji in this set? Because, much like Assassin, Benji wants the blues and yellows because, a little bit, lower attack, and then, Katsu could make use of both.
Mm-hmm. I will say, if you go into drafting Ninja and Outsiders expecting to have the same power output as Fi, you're going to be really disappointed.
Yeah.
You're going to be really underwhelmed. These are not the same ninjas that you were drafting in the last set. And there's a I would call it a lack of meaningful breakpoints on a lot of the ninja attacks, which are very easily played around, very easily blocked out. So I think if you're playing a ninja, you might be surprised that you're relying more heavily on what is probably the best weapon in the format of the Kadachis.
Yeah.
To move your game plan forward, and not necessarily the attacks that you're playing.
Yeah, that makes sense. Now, we had talked about how the breakpoints are tough, right? In this format, it's tough to kind of push through the damage. Does that kind of prop up Benji to a point with the natural built-in evasion to be kind of a star of this format? Or is Benji just not doing enough? The power level of the ninja cards that he wants is just not really there.
Well, I absolutely do believe that Benji has opportunity to be a dark horse in this format with very specific knowledge of how you want to win the game.
Mm-hmm.
Like I was saying earlier, if you know your game plan is to whittle down your opponent and then win with the evasive unblockable Benji damage, and you're playing under that win condition, you're going to get a lot of games just by doing that. You can play a the 17 life total, it might surprise you. Even that is not necessarily stopping a game from going the distance.
Yeah.
So you can play a game under the mindset or the idea of playing a little bit slower, taking full advantage of the Kadachi attacks, and keeping a couple of your evasive cards left in the deck, and then closing out a game by going head jab, head jab, head jab for 6 damage that can't be prevented. It's I think it's very worth considering. Now, granted, if your opponent also knows that's your win condition, they're going to do everything they can to play around that too, right? They're going to hold on to their equipment. They're going to put their defense reactions and their brush offs in their arsenal, and things to stop you from reaching that same win condition. But I do think that there's a propensity for winning games with that mindset.
Yeah, and it is very cool that we get to kind of see Benji in action in a limited format. Very unique kind of ninja. Katsu, the Kadachis are really the star there. I feel like, the really cool payoffs come at the higher rarity, and it doesn't it gets access to the dagger throwing through hurl and stuff like that, but the effect is just not the same that we saw with the on hits from the assassin daggers. So kind of interesting to see how Ninja shakes out in the format. Benji's something that scares me for sure. Katsu, I'm not so sure. Sitting here just looking at the card pool, but something that does scare me, in terms of evasion that we talked about is in Ranger, right? Both Rangers have 2 ways to kind of sneak in damage. Azalea, let's talk about Azalea, who just won the Chicago Brawl, which is, hey, listen, for all the Azalea cult people out there, I'm very happy for you. It's now your time in the sun. The brutes will get it eventually. Hey, listen, everybody, I'm happy for you. But yeah, we'll talk about something else in a bit in a listener question. But Azalea has the dominate, right? Which is awesome. How do you feel about Azalea in this format? Because I've always felt like Ranger can be really tough to draft.
Mm-hmm. My initial, I guess, evaluation of Ranger in this set is, unfortunately, it's very similar to how I feel about Assassin, where it's you're playing Riptide by default, and you will play Azalea if your card pool supports it.
Gotcha.
She does have an opportunity to actually really be the hero that is winning these games by not going the run out of cards route, just by using very powerful dominate damage, sneaking over the top, and closing out games that way. Uh, Unfortunately, there's not a ton of cards in the set that really support that gameplay. That
Hmm.
gameplay style. I mean, you have Spire sniping and Scout the Periphery, and some of the others, all the Seekers equipment and stuff that do let you do a little bit of opting, but there's not a lot of great reliable ways
Yeah.
to make sure that you're doing that dominate every turn. And if you're not doing the dominate every turn, you're better off playing Riptide.
Yeah, yeah. It's his card pool. I mean, it's very similar, right? But I think in my opinion, I mean, I've been playing a lot of Riptide and CC.
Mhm.
The trap clause is very important, and especially in a lower life total format, right? When it gets to that point where you're trying to close out the game before you run out of cards, that sneaking in that extra one damage is so important, right? And then they also have insane abilities on top of that. So,
Mhm.
what are you looking for in Riptide when you're drafting him? Traps is pretty obvious, right? They're just powerful and they're good to have. But what else do you really like to see? Because he also has that nice little free reload.
Mhm. He also takes really good advantage of some of the generics in the set,
Hmm.
especially the ones that have Go again. Ravenous Rabble would be a good example, or the Scout the Periphery, like I mentioned. Seek Horizon, Searching for a Scrap, which I think is one of the better cards in this format. Takes really good advantage of, as far as generics are concerned. But it's also these cards, the Lace With cards
Oh yeah.
and the Fletch cards are
Hmm.
really really powerful as well with Riptide. And Riptide takes really good advantage of the new bow as well. Because if you're able to take advantage of his hero ability and then just pay one resource to flip it over and give it the aim counter, that's very efficient plays. Um, so I think what you want with Riptide is you want to have a pool of cards that allow you to play like really solid 3 card hands.
Okay.
So you can play a card to activate Riptide, and then you can put your arsenal. You can put the arrow in the arsenal, and then you can take advantage of the bow by paying the resources. Really strong 3 card hands that can represent 9 or 10 damage,
Hmm.
which is really above rate for 3 cards in this format.
Yeah, yeah, and it seems so. And then you also have the nice little backup plan, or not even backup plan. It's the end game plan, right? You pitch your traps early. I feel like that's how you should play them. And he also gets the nice little quiver, right? Because that quiver it looks like it does nothing, right? His quiver, I forget, it's right in front of me somewhere, but it just puts your arsenal on the bottom, and you just get stuck with things, right? And it's a one time use, but gosh, it really makes sure that his deck just doesn't totally sputter, which is really cool.
That quiver is deceptively good. There's no reason not to put it in there. You're gonna use it probably like one in every 4 or 5 games,
Hmm.
because you're going to end up in situations like that where you arsenaled something the previous turn, expecting your opponent to do something significant, and then they didn't. Because
Yeah.
there's going to be a lot of turn cycles in this game, in this format where they're just going to use like 2 cards and arsenal, and you're like, I didn't even get to like block with everything. How am I going to take advantage of this feisty locals
Yeah.
that's in my arsenal? And now it's breaking the rest of my turn. And yeah, it's really good. It surprised me how often I was considering using it.
Yeah, it's really interesting, and something I think probably for both the Rangers here. It's I love the fact that all three colors of the shot cycle is good, right?
Mhm.
The Especially in Riptide, right? The blue is easy to flip into the 4, right? Which is awesome. It's a
Mhm.
break point that also presents a really devastating on hit most of the time. So
Mhm.
something that I would prioritize in Riptide and Azalea probably, but more the yellows and reds in Azalea, but the blues seem awesome in Riptide, and they're also cool.
Even blue Falcon Wing
Oh yeah,
turns on searching for a scrap.
yep.
So don't don't discount blue Falcon Wing.
Falcon Wing's awesome, and it's something that was like kind of sneakily good. You know, like obviously I just threw it into my sealed deck and I was like, oh wow, like I want this. I want like 10 more of these in the deck, like right. So, God, I mean, Riptide. I mean, I've been singing my praises on Riptide. Constructed. We'll see where he goes, but I think he's probably going to be my favorite hero of the draft in the set. Now, looking at all of these heroes, I know you mentioned that Uzuri's your favorite. Is Uzuri going to be your favorite to draft? Do you think?
I don't know that I would say it's going to be my favorite, but what I am willing to guess is it's probably the one I'll end up playing the most.
Okay.
Because what you're going to end up, kind of going back to what we were saying earlier, is you just have access to the most cards,
Mm-hmm.
and you more often than not, 2 to 3 seats are going to be Uzuri seats, and then an Arachne seat. So odds are you're going to be in an Uzuri seat. So
Mm-hmm.
you might as well just get comfortable with the idea, concede the fact that you're probably going to play more Uzuri than you play the rest of the heroes. Which, that works out for me because I think she's cool and I think she's a lot of fun to play.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, before we get to these listener questions, this is still very early in the format, right? You've done one draft and the set's been out for, as we're recording, technically 3 days. Do you have like some kind of ranking in terms of the power level of the draftable heroes, or is it you think it's still a little all over the place?
That's a really tough question, because I think if you want to look at heroes as their power level on average, it's very different as their power levels in outlier draft scenarios,
Mm-hmm.
where Riptide, for example, or Benji or Katsu could have insanely powerful decks, but on average they're going to be weaker.
Sure.
So I tend to look at how things are going to play out on average.
Mm-hmm.
So I think on average the assassin decks are going to perform the most consistently. Probably followed then by, I'm going to say Ranger and then Ninja. I do think that Ninja is kind of the weakest out of the three, which surprises me because originally I thought that wouldn't be the case, but I think I'm also still living in like Stockholm Syndrome Phi land.
Yeah.
So there might be a little bit of that going on.
Yeah. It's kind of interesting. I think I'm probably with you. There's something to be said about something you said a little bit earlier about Riptide, that he's one of the heroes that uses a lot of the generics the most, the best way, which is something worth considering because, like we said, you can easily be in generics for a couple picks here and not really worry about it. And then there's also a lot to be said about the evasion of Benji, right? So I think overall I'm really excited for this limited set. I think, I kind of like that we're kind of using all of our cards, which is great. We get to draft the new cards that you just, put in a deck and sleeved up. Might as well use all of them.
Yeah.
So, and it doesn't feel like we're using all the cards, but like, it doesn't feel like long, if that makes sense. Right. Like, which is cool. And I think it is a great sign. So I don't know if that's how you feel, but that's how I am perceiving the set currently.
Mm-hmm. It's absolutely how I feel because I really love low power level formats. So the weaker the decks are, like the more fun that I tend to have, especially when it comes to limited gameplay. And thank you for actually mentioning the interaction of the ninjas with the generic cards, because that was something that I wanted to touch on and I totally forgot to. That the ninjas, they, like you were saying, they don't take advantage of the generic cards nearly as well as the other two classes.
Mm-hmm.
So unfortunately, and they're also probably going to have access to the least ninja and hybrid cards in general. I had a sealed deck when we were playing sealed that out of my 6 packs only had 12 ninja and ninja hybrid cards out of all of my. So playing a ninja deck of what would that be, 18 generic cards?
Yeah, at a minimum.
You're not gonna have a good time.
Yeah, it's tough. It is tough, but it does feel like it might end up being, if you're the only ninja drafter, like anything, it's going to be great. But I think 1 or 2 ninja drafters at the table are going to be eating good, I think. So very cool set, very excited. But do you want to answer some listener questions here, Rylie?
I would love that. Let's do it.
First comes from Darth Prentice, who I should have said at the top of the show might be returning to producing the show. He had a baby, and he's starting to get some more time on his hands. We will see if that's the case. Congratulations, Darth, and welcome back. He asks, what's Riley's take on Codex of Frailty? Because there's been a lot of talk about Codex of Frailty. Is it ban worthy? Is it appropriately balanced? What are your thoughts here? And I'll give my thoughts too.
Codex is a really pushed card. It's really, really strong. The turn-to-turn value of playing Codex of Frailty, it's going to create spikes in gameplay where the turns where you play it are so disproportionately better than the turns where you don't. And I don't really like that in gameplay, which is a similar reason of why they banned Pulse of Iceloft.
Sure.
Pulse of Iceloft is another card that it creates huge spikes in power level the turn that you see it, which is hard. It's hard. You can't play around it necessarily until you're very late into the game. And I kind of think it just creates feels bad moments when you have cards like that, because it leads to different games where you end up walking away saying, well, my opponent saw all three of their codexes and I saw one, so I lost. Art of War is another example of that, where you're playing those mirror games and like, well, my opponent saw 3 Art of Wars in the first 4 turns, so I lost. I don't like when there's less opportunity for interaction, and I think that's kind of what Codex of Frailty represents. Do I think that it needs to be banned? It's way too early to tell.
Yeah.
With that, but I think it's really strong, and I bet it's a card that they're going to be keeping their eyes on.
Yeah, certainly will be. I like the card. I like playing with it. I don't love playing against it, but it's one of those things, right? You mentioned Art of War, right? Art of War. I love Art of War, but when your opponent sees all three of them, you're like, all right, that's great. I'm super happy. But that's not being banned, but it is a generic. So like it's kind of a staple. So it's kind of hard to like, as LSS probably, it's hard to kind of, kind of like, I don't know, like do it and not like create a lot of feel bads for people who've collected them. Right. And Codex is a little bit less, right? You can only be played by 2 classes, and it is a majestic. It's tough to say. I don't think it's ban worthy. If it starts taking the world by storm, sure, I think we will see bans. But we have one tournament that's happened where Azalea won, and certainly it was Azalea finals. But like, metas adjust, and it was the first people want to play with new cards, right? People were trying new things out. So appropriately balanced. There's an argument to say yes, because Ranger's been pretty bad, or Azalea has been pretty bad. So there's that, and I don't necessarily. I mean, it probably plays pretty well in Assassin as well, but I feel like it's definitely probably more of a star in Azalea. So, and this is a message for anyone who's been calling for bans of this card. Let me play with it a little bit first. Jeez, come on. I only have 1 so far. I need 2 more. let me play with the card. Damn it. Next comes from Remy. And we kind of answered this a little bit, but he asks, is Riptide Traps viable in draft / limited, or is it best to wait for Classic Constructed Blitz for full access to the Ranger goodies? Mm-hmm. I truly believe that the traps are quite useful and powerful in draft. Some of them are probably better in draft than CC and Blitz. But how do you feel about that?
The traps are always good. Even if you're not taking advantage of them for their situational triggers, they're always blocking 3, mm-hmm. and they're doing things like going in your arsenal and blocking Benji's unpreventable damage. Or they're reacting to the spike with Blood Rot that Arachne's playing against you. They're always good. I would say don't convince yourself that you can only play them when their trigger is activated, because you're gonna sit in games waiting for it and it's never going to come, and then you're going to be in a really feels bad situation. One of the games I actually ended up losing in sealed was a game where I had my opponent down to 1 life and we were very late in the game, And my opponent was playing Uzuri, and I had the Blood Rat Trap, which triggers when they do a reaction. So I was like, oh, great, this has become my win condition. Well, we played out 6 more turns, and they never reacted for the rest of the game. And I made some suboptimal turn-to-turn games, I guess turn-to-turn decisions throughout that game, with the anticipation that the Blood Rat Trap was my win condition. And then it never was. And I lost that game because of it. Whereas if I had just played it at any point throughout the game, I likely would have won. So don't convince yourself that you have to do that.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Kind of situation you can get yourself in.
Yeah, they still block, right? I mean, like, the best part of the card probably is still preventing 3 damage, right? Next comes from Andromeda, who, and we kind of answered this as well. It's like, how quickly do you need to pick who you're playing, and is it possible to pivot with less cards in the set than normal draft sets? I think I want to focus on the pivot part because we kind of said that you have some time. What are your thoughts on pivoting in this set?
Yeah, it's way more forgiving than, if you're used to doing Uprising draft, like you were mentioning earlier, Tommy. It's you were really considering committing by like pick 3 a lot of times in Uprising draft, and just hoping that you made the right decision. Sometimes you did, and you were really rewarded for it, and sometimes you didn't, and you ended up with the all yellow Dromai deck, or whatever pile you were going to be playing with.
I've drafted that deck. I remember.
Yeah, it's a lot more forgiving this time around. It's way more lenient as far as the pacing, like I was saying earlier, because there's an extra decision making point that's coming along of picking your hero after you've kind of decided what class you're in. So I think this affords you an opportunity to start hedging towards a specific class or combination of classes because of the hybrid cards. Like we were saying, I would start off by looking at the generics and hybrids, and then probably by pick 4 or 5, I'm leaning in towards a specific class or combination of classes, and then probably around like 7 or 8 or 9, I'm committing to a class, and then by the end of the first pack, I know which hero I'm going to be playing.
That's hey, listen, I agree. Because, hey, listen, I don't like switching super late ever. And it is nice that it's forgiving, and the hybrid cards do really help there. Next question comes from Iron Mag, who asks, how is Limited going to flow since of all the hysteria of packs and rates? We saw the God case where someone had pulled a bunch. We don't know if it's true or not, but we're going to assume maybe it is. But also, the Majestic rate is definitely lower, right? In this set, as opposed to maybe like 8 per case, or 8 per box. We're seeing more like 5, 6. And then the rare rates are interesting because we're seeing packs with 3 rares and we're seeing packs with 1 rare, which means we're also getting the average of 2 rares per pack. My initial take here, because Majestics and Legendaries, it doesn't matter, right? I mean, like, they're great to have in drafts, but like the meat of what you're playing is always going to be commons and rares. The rares, the jump between common and rare power level is not so crazy that it's gonna. I don't think it's gonna affect high level drafts or anything like that. But I would interested to hear your take, Rylie.
Mm-hmm. Well, going to that topic of like the error box, if you're ever sitting down and drafting and you realize quickly that you had one of those error boxes, it would just destroy the integrity of the draft.
Yeah,
altogether. Like you would just have to resolve to the fact that we just need to try a different box.
Yeah.
Which with the cards in your box, you could probably buy 10 more boxes.
Yeah,
So it probably actually wouldn't be that bad for draft as far as that's considered. And I did like briefly want to touch on the Majestic things, because there are less, but I think the ones that you're opening are more meaningful and more powerful on average.
Yes.
There's way more playable Majestics in this set as opposed to Uprising, which half the time you didn't even want to see a Majestic because the majority of them were so bad and unplayable, like Frightmare or whatever else. You see a Frightmare in your pack and you're like, all right, well,
that's a card you'd never play.
That's one less card in this pack, that kind of thing. So if you see a Majestic, there's a way higher chance that you're probably going to take it because on average, I think they're a lot stronger.
Yeah.
As far as like the common and rare rarities, some of the heroes it feels like have way stronger cards at rare
Mm-hmm.
than some of the other heroes. Like Ninja, I think, is an example who almost the entire combo line is stuck in rare. So if you have a lot of rare ninja cards in your packs, you're probably gonna have a better ninja in your pool than you would
Mm-hmm.
on average. Whereas assassin actually doesn't have that many really strong rares. I mean, they have the spikes and they have the shakedowns, but no, sorry, not shakedown. Sneak attack,
Mm-hmm.
and like that kind of feels like it's it.
Yeah.
Ranger has some good rares too, though. With
The
the fletches,
laces.
laces, those are
Yeah.
very strong also. So I think assassin might actually have on the weaker side of the rare cards.
Yeah. Well, another reason to draft assassin, right?
Some of the generics are really good rare too. I guess we should say like death touch and search for a scrap.
Yeah.
So some of those are really good as well.
Popo Mike, Mike Popovich asks, are there any generics you're hoping to open up at the start of the draft? Now, we talked about Threadbare Tunic and some other things, but is there anything that you really like to see?
I took a note for this one.
Okay.
Give me 1 second. I put down search for a scrap. If we're talking about specifically generic, search for a scrap. Ravenous Rabble, Brush Off, Come to Fight is a card that's really good. It's the only generic that blocks for 3 at common and rare, so that's worth looking out for. And Destructive Deliberation, specifically in red, I really like.
Yeah.
I know a lot of people are liking the I can't think of what it's called now, but it's the one that's basically a pummel on an attack if they keep all of their cards.
Humble?
Not that, no, not
No.
Humble. That card's pretty good too. I have the card list up actually. I can look for it. But basically, it attacks for 6, and if it hits and they have all their cards in their hand, they have to block and cut down to size is what it's called. And a lot of people are really liking that card, and I actually think that card's really underwhelming.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times you can't take advantage of all 4 cards in your hand anyway.
Yeah.
So you're gonna block anyway. So it just becomes like a vanilla 2 for 6, which is fine, but ultimately not very exciting. Whereas Destructive Deliberation, your opponent actually has to really consider blocking that with 2 cards because they don't want to give you the ponder token.
Absolutely. And one that I really like, and maybe just because I want to play it in Brute, but is red freewheeling Renegades. 1 for 6. If they block with a card, it becomes a 1 for 4, which is still breakpoint, which is like, I think, pretty great. And I found feisty locals, specifically the yellow, feels I mean, the red's great, but the yellow, because like I think like Riptide and like Azalea, like they like the yellows, right? It's an efficient card to pitch, and the yellows attacks for 2. If you want to block, it becomes 4. Like that card's closed out games, I feel like,
Yes.
and that one's really cool to look out for.
Feisty Locals is one of those really good cards that you pitch early just to do what you wanted to do anyway, and then it does something very meaningful later in the game.
Yeah.
So I also like Feisty Locals.
Yeah, it does a lot of what maybe not at the same power level as Virulent Touch, but Virulent Touch is another card that it just helps you close out the game. So these are cards you want to look out for, I think, because like you said, we're all trying to find ways to close out these games. Capolo asks, what cards are a definitive sign that a hero is open? It's kind of hard to say, I think, currently. I think it's probably a nice blend of just how many cards are in the pack, which good ones are still there. But do you have any specific answers for this?
I did try to write down some cards just to be keeping in mind. So I picked for Assassin in general the spike reaction cards, as well as the stealth attacks, isolate and infect, are some of the best assassin cards. And then for Uzuri specifically, I had put down sneak attack, and for Arachne, I'd put Razor's Edge and also Prowl. Prowl is a stealth card that is way better in Arachne than it is in Uzuri, because Uzuri is going to have a really hard time playing 2 stealth cards in one attack to take advantage of Prowl, whereas Arachne is going to do that pretty frequently. I put down for Ninja here every single 0 cost blue that blocks for 3. So that includes a recoil, back heel kick, and 1-2 punch. I had put down Surging Strike for Katsu specifically, and then Head Jab and Twin Twisters for Benji.
Sure.
And lastly, for Ranger, I didn't really have anything specific for Ranger because, like I said, they both really want the same cards
Mm-hmm.
for the most part, and then one or the other just takes advantage of the cards better than the other one does. So you're gonna know Ranger's open if you see red arrows.
Yep.
That's been a given anytime there's been a Ranger in a draft set. So just look for red arrows. If you're on pack like or pick like 6 or 7, and there's 2 red arrows in your pack, you're in the Ranger seat. It's probably pretty obvious at that point.
Yeah, absolutely. And and then you got things like the laces and the fletches. So yeah. Pretty good. Now, Armor, who is a local to you, does Rylie think everyone realizes the power of threadbare tunic, or is it underrated? Now, after this podcast, that will change because everybody listens to it and they're all going to start picking it. But for now, what do you think?
Well, for I think for an experienced player who looks at Threadbare Tunic, they're going to quickly look at that card and say, this is a very powerful card. And they're going to know exactly why. I think for an inexperienced player, they're not going to understand why it is so good,
Mm-hmm.
probably until they've had somebody play it against them,
Yeah.
right? When they do something really impactful, they actually play all 4 of their cards and their opponent blocks out. And they snuck a couple of damage through, and they're like, oh, they're really satisfied with how that turn went. And then their opponent Threadbare Tunics and plays Death Touch from Arsenal. And then they're going to say, okay, now I know why this is so good.
Yep.
Yeah, it's really, really, anytime you can cheat resources in this game, it's going to do something powerful.
Absolutely. And it is quite good. Now, this has been a blast, Rylie. Thank you so much for coming on. You're wealth of knowledge and, a good bud, and always love having you on. And, I have a feeling it won't be the last time unless you choose not to, but, this has been a blast. I would love for you to plug anything you'd like to plug or where people can find you and some stuff you got coming down the pipes if there's anything.
Yeah. Well, I'm probably the most active on Twitter, Fab Rylie. Although I haven't been as active on there as I'd like to be lately. Hopefully, I'll find some motivation to pick that up again. Be a little more active. I do moderate the South Central Pennsylvania Flesh and Blood Facebook page, which is awesome because our community has now gotten to a point where it's self-regulating. Right, it's self-sustaining now at this point, which is awesome. So, I'm pretty much just letting the community run wild at this point, and they're doing a great job with it to the point where other people are creating their own discords, such as the Bleak Expanse, which I saw you just joined the other day.
Mm-hmm.
I'll shout them out if anyone is interested or in the South Central area and wants to join a very active Discord community. Let me know. I'll make sure I get you the invite so you can jump over there. So those are the places where online, at least, I am the most present.
Awesome. Well, I hope everybody does check that out. And then I just joined the channel Bleak Expanse. It's, I haven't looked around much, but it's, it seems like a lot of familiar faces and some great people. You all can continue to find me on Twitter at FreshBudsPod. Check out the Buds Discord. It's a great community, safe space for everyone. Good time. We play games, talk about random stuff. It is a lot of great people in there. And check out the YouTube. Like I mentioned at the top of the show, trying to get those subscribers up so I can put myself through misery. And and if you're listening on like Spotify or anything like that, you can rate the podcast. That helps a lot, right? Because when a lot of new players, as we said earlier, new players are coming to the game, they look for content, they look up Flesh and Blood podcasts. The highly rated ones are there, so they pop up a little bit sooner. So all that fun stuff, and this has been a blast. Now, Rylie, as always, I like to end the show talking about some food. Is there any food you want to talk about today?
I actually do have a food item I would love to discuss with you because it's a thing that I recently discovered actually when I was out at Worlds. I had never had this before. I was in San Francisco and we were actually hiking, and we got done and went to this cafe, and they had an almond croissant. Have you ever had an almond croissant, Tommy?
Oh yes.
How do you feel about almond croissants?
I'm a sucker for anything almonds, right? I love the flavor of almond, and I love almond nuts as well. So, I mean, I would love to hear how you feel about it, because if that was your first time, I would like to hear.
It was. And I was compelled to try the almond croissant because I don't think I would have picked it otherwise, except I had bought a candle at Target
Okay.
that was almond croissant scent. And it was the best scented candle I think I ever had. So I was like, I got to find out what this thing tastes like. So, I had an almond croissant and it exceeded my expectations. It was so good. So now every time I've gone somewhere and I try, bakery is an option. I'm looking for almond croissants, trying to find them to see how they stack up. Unfortunately, Lancaster County does not have any quality almond croissants.
That's a shame.
There is one bakery. I know because I spent an entire day looking for almond croissants in Lancaster. Found it, and then it just didn't live up to the previous ones that I've had. But New York has really good almond croissants. I had a chocolate almond croissant when I was there. It was phenomenal. So good. So I highly recommend giving the almond croissant a shot.
I love that little shout out for the almond croissant, because it's not something that people are talking about. I think people should be talking about it more. And I'll tell you what, Rylie, I don't really go for regular croissants. Like, I'm not like a croissant guy, per se. I prefer like a bagel in the morning or something like that. But
Sure.
if almond or chocolate's kind of getting involved, things definitely change. So,
Yeah.
and now I'm gonna have to get a freaking almond croissant this week. Thank you.
You can find a chocolate almond croissant. It is a holy union of all things delicious.
Well, I'm gonna have to do that. So, well, hey, Rylie, thank you for making me hungry. As the end of this show usually goes, I just leave hungry. But it's nice around some dinner time here. So, thank you for joining us, everyone. Have fun drafting the set, and let me know how you're liking limited. And we will see you next week.